Welcome to Online Actions That Matter, Strategies for Digital Engagement in the Time of COVID. So, hi, my name's Ilana Levin. I am Program Director of New Media Mentors. I've been teaching digital strategy since it began being a thing in the first place. I've predominantly worked in the labor movement and in immigrant community organizations. So a lot of my experience is going to be around targeting companies and putting pressure tactics in those sorts of campaigns. And in addition to leading trainings as New Media Mentors, I also co-founded Organizing 2.0, which is a digital strategy conference in New York. My pronouns are she or they, and my Twitter handle is ELANA_Brooklyn, like the place, which is also where I am. So yeah, I work for New Media Mentors. Our whole thing is teaching online strategy trainings. We began by Netroots Nation, and we continue to be the education and training partner of Netroots Nation. So if you would like more digital strategy training, reach out to us, reach out to me. And there's also going to be an expanded version of this training that I will be leading online for people who will register and sign up for it. That'll be happening in the next couple months, hopefully sooner than later. Oh, somebody else pointed out, thanks Auntie, that if you want to chat with everybody in the Zoom, you want to make sure that you've toggled your setting to chat with all panelists and attendees, because the default is set to only all panelists. And joining me is Aaron.
Hey everyone, my name is Aaron. I'm a college student at Macaulay Honors College and John Jay College. I'm an organizer with Queens DSA, and I'm here today because I was invited by Ilana to talk about a spreadsheet that I made a month or two back, and I'll be talking more about that later in the presentation. You can find my Twitter at Aaron Naraf, and I go by he, him. Back to you, Ilana.
Thank you, Aaron. So this whole training came together in a different way when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I saw two different asks in my email box. The first ask was give me money, which I did. I gave people money. That's important. But as a person who was not a millionaire, there's only so much money I can give at any one time. And that would be true for most of the people on your email list as well. And the other ask I got was to go to an in-person event for either mutual aid purposes or for an in-person protest. And as I may have mentioned, I live in New York. And in March especially, I was not going to be going to anything in person because I did not want to risk dying. And as I got these emails, I thought to myself, I know for a fact that there are other kinds of actions that you could be asking me to take right now that would not involve just donations and that would not require me to risk my life or health. And I really want to make sure that folks are thinking about some of those actions and are asking their lists to do them because they are important. There's a lot of online organizing tactics that folks share or do that ultimately are about just capturing somebody's email address so you can contact them later. And that is important. You do need to do that. But you also need to be asking people to take meaningful actions online. And this session is all about helping you figure out what those things are and what they should be. So I want to hear from you guys though. What are some of the things you asked people on your email list or in your network to do since COVID hit? What kinds of things have you invited them to, online or off? Throw that up in the chat. I want to see what kind of things you've been asking your folks to do. Attend webinars, yes. And if this is the person, Elizabeth, do you work for the anti-harassment organization that's been doing amazing anti-harassment webinars? People have been asking folks to sign petitions, doing photo collages with groups, doing member Q&As, directing tweets to their mayor, yes, all the way, Twitter rallies. Yeah, people have been super active. Joining anti-racism workshops, I've got an example from that in a moment. And of course, directing people to phone banking. That's gonna be pretty straightforward now with the elections coming up. It'll be pretty straightforward what to ask people to do for that one. So one of the first things that groups should be doing is asking their people how they're doing. I remember getting a text message from my friends at the Working Families Party right when COVID hit. And it asked me to, and literally asked me like how I was doing, if I was in crisis and if there was things that they could help me with. It only made sense for them to do this because they actually had a way to help me if I did have an issue. they're not a social services agency, so it's not like they could do everything in the world, but they were connected to mutual aid groups. So if I said to them, I need something, they could connect me to resources. And while the focus of this training is very much on online actions, I want to bring up that in this time of COVID crisis, a lot of people who are not normally used to asking for help are needing help. And sometimes it takes people a minute or two to realize that they are in crisis too, and that they need help too. And that they should be reaching out for assistance as well. So I view doing these kind of COVID check-in texts as actually being a very political action. And with the end of the anti-eviction measures coming together, and with no housing relief, we know evictions are going to be heating up. And we know that COVID is going to be coming back in the fall because of what's happening in schools. So consider keeping COVID check-ins and housing crisis check-ins in your list of things to send to your list, but only ask people to give you that sort of feedback if you are prepared to then connect them with resources. Don't just ask them how they're doing and say, come to my meeting, and like leave it at that. If people need help, you need to connect them with resources. And that is important for community building. And remember, organizing is organizing, whether it's online or off. Like, if this is about building your personal relationships. Organizational welcome calls and taking them seriously is really important. Working Families Party has a whole pathway that they've been using since pre-COVID to sort of drive folks into participating in online volunteer opportunities. A lot of them are text banks, and they drive people to those text banks through supporter pledges, as well as through their mobilize.us page. There's going to be a Mobilize US training about their platform coming up. And with organizational welcome calls, one of the things to do is to set up breakout groups so that people are actually talking to each other and making real personal connections, because that is an important part of keeping people feeling like their involvement is meaningful and that there's a human connection there. And there we are. One of the cool strategies that combines taking action with volunteer management and community building is WFP did a Defund the Police 101 teach-in. There's a lot of folks who are new to the anti-policing framework, who have a lot of questions and concerns. And so they did a 101, and they literally educated people about this issue and answered their questions and made it new folks friendly. And then at the end of it, they were able to pivot to an ask, which was to get people to volunteer to text bank for district attorney races, which of course are races where you can really keep the police in check. Yeah, I encourage folks to go to WFP's next virtual welcome gathering. So thinking about how you're going to use those welcome meetings to then bring people into volunteer opportunities, because you've shown them a community they can be involved with, you've given them space to learn from you. And when you teach people how to do things, teach people about things, they appreciate it. One of the sorts of online trainings I'd like to see more folks doing is teaching their members how to tweet. A lot of people who haven't been on Twitter before are really hungry to learn how to use it now, especially because we're all trapped at home. And when you teach people how to do skills, they're thankful for it, and they tend to use those skills. When you have an understanding of who's on your list, you also can start to target your email asks based on what kinds of things people like to do. So Greenpeace, they got a big email list. They got a bigger email list than most of us on this call, right? But what they've done is they've taken a look to see who on their email list has clicked to take action on different kinds of activities, and they send emails about those activities to the people who've done them. So they're setting up a section of the Greenpeace email list that'll just be for people who click on Twitter asks. So when Greenpeace sends you an ask hey, take action on Twitter, you hit yes, I'm gonna do it, you'll be tagged to be on the Greenpeace Twitter list. And then you'll get more asks for Twitter versus somebody who maybe clicks to act on Instagram, etc. Or folks who are really good about doing phone calls. That's the thing with digital, is I know who at least clicked to show interest in doing these different actions, and I can break down my email list so I'm sending people appropriate actions for what they like to do. I definitely encourage to think about sending the right people on your list the right things. If you've been to any good online trainings lately, I want to hear what they were, and I want you to tell me about them in the chat. Sol Figueroa, my old friend from the Bank Worker Organizing Campaign, said they were doing a digital summer camp to teach their leaders how to use best practices and digital tools with the, that's with the Walmart Workers Organizing Campaign, I believe, correct? But yeah, tell us what the good trainings you've done online were. So when you've trained your members in Twitter, or if you happen to have an active Twitter community as it is, here's one of the cool things you can do. Remember Rent Live? They're doing like, TV was doing like live Broadway musicals and stuff. So Rent Live was, we all knew what was gonna happen. And the folks at ACT UP New York, you know, Rent is about HIV crisis, right? The folks at ACT UP New York have an active petition telling the company that makes the HIV prevention, the HIV drug, to break the patent so that the drug will actually be affordable. They knew that these folks had bought ad time on Rent Live. And so what they did was, when the ad went up for this Truvada, they were like, Truvada really cares about you and really wants to help stop AIDS. ACT UP used the hashtag Rent Live and promoted their petition to break the patent. So this is important. They had this tweet happening while a live TV special was happening, while the advertisement was happening. It was planned, it was timely, it was an online action people could take, and they used the trending hashtag Rent Live. That is why so many people saw it, right? They got a lot of retweets and a lot of shares. Important note, 2 hashtags max for tweets. I see people make this mistake all the time at all kinds of digital levels. Studies show that tweets with more than 2 hashtags are shared less often. So if you're doing your own campaign and you're making your own hashtag, like for example, hashtag break the patent, you would use that hashtag and combine it with the popular hashtag, in this case, Rent Live. Or if the HIV folks were doing this and there wasn't like a live Broadway musical about HIV happening at the same time, they would do like hashtag break the patent and hashtag HIV or something. But use that popular hashtag and use your own hashtag. But that's it. You only have 2 hashtags on Twitter, folks. Any more than that, people won't share your stuff. Now here's where we get into the juicy things. First off, I'm not a lawyer, so there's stuff that you might want to talk about with your lawyer before you do it. That in mind, here's some Twitter tactics. Yeah, NYPD had a hashtag that they were putting out calling My NYPD. They wanted folks to tag them and like say how much they love the police. And no, that's not how New Yorkers feel about the police. They're killing people. Very quickly, activists were the ones floating the hashtag My NYPD hashtag and took it over. And that was it. That was the dialogue. That was the news story. Oh, getting some recommendations for folks that movement schools online trainings were really good. I hear that that's true. Here's another hashtag takeover. Does anybody else remember Ask JPM for Ask JP Morgan a number of years ago? So JP Morgan wanted to do like a tweet chat to ask them questions. And the hashtag they've promoted was Ask JP Morgan. Now, of course, we have a lot of things we'd like to ask JP Morgan, including like stop stealing people's homes and you should probably go to jail. So as soon as folks saw Ask JP Morgan, people began using that hashtag to hold JP Morgan accountable and completely took over their Q&A session. They have been hiding their head ever since. And I'm just not seeing folks use this tactic as much as they used to anymore. I asked somebody, whatever happened to hashtag takeovers? And my friend said to me, well, I think that it's gotten harder as there's more brands and more traffic on Twitter. To which I would say, no, more people are on Twitter now. So it used to be if you emailed your list and asked people to get in on a hashtag action, a small percentage could do it. Now, more people are on Twitter. So while yes, it takes more people to take over a hashtag and to get it to trend, you have more people to draw from in the first place. Additionally, the key to anything is coalition building. So reach out to other groups, right? Greenpeace partnered with the grocery workers to do some hashtag stuff against Kroger groceries. Like build out your coalition with other groups who will also take over the hashtag with you. I love these tweets. They're just so wonderful. So this is also my new favorite thing. I got a sponsored ad on Twitter from Montefiore Health System showing this beautiful piece of art they commissioned. And you know, I'm all for paying artists. You should hire artists and pay them to make graphics for you right now. Those are important for social media. It's important for keeping artists like not starving out on the streets. However, the hospital paid an artist to make some beautiful art while not actually giving their nurses the protective equipment that they asked for or having adequate staffing levels for their nurses. So here I am, and I saw their little ad, and I replied to it saying, if you care so much about nurses, why are you leaving them unprotected? Why are you ignoring their union? Because the union was in a conflict with the hospital at the time. And that was in response to an advertisement. And I started to get responses from folks, you know, like this is a feel-good image, and I was bringing up an issue into the conversation and educating people about the truth behind it, that this isn't just an innocuous, we love our healthcare workers message. This is a tweet in which the hospital is trying to make themselves look good while not actually doing anything to support the workers who they claim to be supporting. And one of the things about Twitter advertisements and about Twitter in general is that Twitter doesn't know good engagement from bad engagement, which means that if Twitter sees you engaging in something, by the way, this piece right here is the one where I'm like, maybe don't tweet it, maybe keep this up between you and me. So Twitter doesn't know good engagement from bad engagement. So Twitter knows that when I see advertisements about Airbnbs, I respond to those advertisements. Twitter doesn't seem to realize that how I respond to those advertisements is by pointing out that Airbnb is displacing people in New York and hurting our communities, which means that I see all of Airbnb's ads for some reason. And in any ad that they happen to do, I respond to it and I educate people about the reality. You can see in this ad, I basically single-handedly ratioed them. So this is a tweet where the ad had 49 people retweeted their propaganda attacking the New York comptroller, and 74 people hit like. But 59 people were out there with me telling Airbnb this was a line of bull. And my tweet responding to them got 55 likes and a number of shares. And look, like I only got 5 retweets. I'm not gonna claim massive credit or be like, I went viral. I did not go viral. But I just did this as an individual. Can you imagine if an organization reached out to their email list and said, hey guys, why don't you join me in responding to this advertisement and educating people about what this thing is really about? I think you could actually completely take over their ads and educate even more people. So that is a good tactic. And one of the reasons why I don't turn off my advertisements on Twitter. I want to see what people in my neighborhood are getting advertised in, right? See what propaganda we're getting, so I can figure out how I can respond to it. Somebody asks, what about starting a trend on Twitter with a hashtag? I've seen those organized in conservative Facebook groups, Slack rooms, and fed by right-wing media outlets. So it kind of hijacks the public attention. So one thing I would say is there are hashtags that are trending that you don't want to encourage the trending of because they're harmful. Sometimes like there's a disinformation hashtag and it's not really big yet. Jumping in that with that hashtag is actually only going to make things worse. There is a disinformation panel tomorrow morning, I believe, with Shireen Mitchell. She will have more on that. Go to it and hear more from them. But in terms of inventing our own hashtags, yes, we should absolutely do those, and they need coordination to take off. There is one sad thing I see on the reg, which is I see nonprofits make up a hashtag for a campaign and they use it and nobody else uses it, it's only them. That's not really significant. Like the whole point of a hashtag is that you're using it to connect people to each other. So if you're gonna make up a new hashtag, be ready to do outreach to coalition partners and beyond that to people outside the nonprofit industrial sector and get them ready to use those hashtags too and educate them about it. Make outreach to those accounts. So here's something an independent activist who is joining me right now did that made my day and was an amazing action. Aaron, come and join me, come off mute.
Hello.
Hello, I'd been following Aaron for a while when I saw Aaron doing something totally badass, which was the campaign #NoCopMoney. He and the other folks who joined in on this tag moved $66,000 in cop union money away from candidates and into anti-racist organizing. That's a lot of money, and this was at the local level that they began this. So Aaron, tell me how you started #NoCopMoney.
Yeah, so this really started from a spreadsheet that I had made even before George Floyd protests happened, because I had been going through a list of campaign filings for different candidates in New York City. I noticed that a lot of these so-called progressive Democrats were taking a lot of money, thousands of dollars, from very conservative law enforcement unions. So I ended up making like a spreadsheet, making a list of all the different people who have that money, and how much money they had taken. I didn't really know what to do with it until the George Floyd protests happened, and all this different activism sprouted up around cop accountability. And that's when I just kind of like tweeted it out. I didn't think it would gain much traction outside like local politics, but it really blew up, and it really gained a lot of traction, as you can see from the tweets that Alana's showing.
So what I love is that you just like straight up tagged all these elected officials on their own Twitter accounts, and with the amount of money for each one of them. Like why was that important to do?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's on screen here, but what I did in my initial thread is that every elected official is releasing a statement about Minneapolis and about the protests and George Floyd. And I wanted to expose them for their hypocrisy. So what I did, and anyone can do this, is I quote tweeted each one of their tweets about Minneapolis and the George Floyd protests. And I wrote above it, X person has taken this much money from law enforcement. And that was very effective getting people to pay attention, just seeing that like stark juxtaposition of this is how much money they've taken, this is their hypocritical response. And it was very effective at getting a lot of people to notice and pay attention.
And this is a particularly powerful blue state tactic, so to speak, right? Because you have people here who want to be seen one way and who are not matching up to it. And it was also significant because these are local elected officials. Like I'm pretty sure that when you tweet, I know that when I tweet at Schumer, sometimes he does see it and get angry, which it makes me happy. But I know for a fact that when you're local electeds, they don't get as many tweets and they don't get as much attention. So they absolutely are seeing all of these folks tweeting at them. And it makes a big difference. And you can make a bigger difference without having like 1 million people joining in that way. So I love that you eventually got national press coverage of this. Like, tell me, like, how did the spread of the popularity of this, like, what was the scale this ended up taking?
So what happened was that one of the greatest things that happened out of this is that, as you may know, there were a lot of progressive people who won in recent primaries, and there were a lot of primary challengers to a lot of these people, and they kind of took up this mantle of law enforcement money, and they started like hammering their opponents with it. And one of those elected officials eventually announced that she would donate her $5,000 something in law enforcement money. That started a whole cascade of elected officials across New York City. And that's where we are today. We have 21 elected officials who have pledged to donate $66,000. And it's really because of the pressure that a lot of voters put on their elected officials, or a lot of pressure that orgs put on elected officials, and that primary challengers put on them. I think all these different sources really pulled together and made like a force that the elected officials couldn't ignore.
Sorry, I just heard that my stuff was not showing full screen. I'm trying to fix that right now. And Heather, sorry, are you there? Can you remind me how I'm gonna toggle this back to get to full screen? I'm trying to, can folks see that? It's not full screen still, hold on. Oh, you know what? I think it's because this is smaller. Give me one moment.
Can you hit the green dot?
Which green dot?
In the top left corner of the window.
Green dot up here. That's
oh my God, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for your forbearance. So yeah, you got national press around this. And one of the things that, I asked you about was like, why do you think it mattered that you did it as a spreadsheet as opposed to some other formats?
I think what a lot of people took away from it was that it wasn't any org doing this or any nonprofit doing this or any a politician doing this. It was just some random guy who had made a spreadsheet, and I guess that authenticity really got people to notice and pay attention because there weren't any ulterior motives behind it. It was just simple facts of how much money they had taken. And a lot of people reach out to me afterwards and were like, "Oh, why don't you make a website? I can help you make a website." And I kind of said, like, that's very kind of you, but that wouldn't really elevate the message at all. Wouldn't really elevate the content. The fact that it was a spreadsheet, it just like very simply laid out all the information. It was simple for people to understand, and the website would just make things more complicated. So sometimes
And
you could just be simpler.
And it looks like you've set off a wave of volunteer-made spreadsheets since then of different issues and
Yeah,
things.
there have been countless spreadsheets from young people across the country who did this with their own elected officials and other pledges that have been created to not take COP money. So in Massachusetts, one group got Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy to sign a no COP money pledge, which is extraordinary, and like 40 or 50 other elected officials. And a lot of elected officials across the country have been pressured into donating their money. The most prominent I saw was the state Senate president of the Colorado Senate, which was just totally random and very extraordinary to see. It really set up this wave because people really cared about this issue and they wanted to do it in their own communities.
I just think this is such a great example of a tactic because you combine so many key things in doing it. And everybody should go follow you online and get involved with hashtag no cop money at your local level as well. So just a heads up, folks, I actually can't really see in the Q&A. Me going to see the Q&A is what ended up messing up the full screen. So Erin, if you could help me keep an eye on the Q&A for me, that would be great. And
Yeah, sure.
feel
We
free
have
to
one
ask both
now.
of us. Oh, what is the question?
Okay, this is from a few minutes ago. Conservatives, this is from Cindy. Conservatives will repost, retweet anything in their genre of hate. Maybe for that reason, they can start trends more easily than liberals can. What are your
That
feelings on
is
that?
true. I think that is true. But I also think that institutionally, for too long, organizations on the left have considered online organizing to not be important and therefore didn't really focus on making outreach to organic online communities that existed. And so we have to do some catching up. You know, those of us who work in the nonprofit industrial complex, so to speak, we need to be reaching out to people who are, this is actually in my next slide, we need to be reaching out to individual people like Erin, you know, and others who are, I mean, to people who are unaffiliated, because Erin is a member of organizations, but not a staffer, like, and reaching out to them and building those relationships so that we're building our own networks. And I think that one of the cool things I've seen folks do is start direct message groups in Twitter so that we are better able to be networked with each other. I ask people before I add them to my DM group because I don't want to like be spamming people. One of the coolest direct message groups I'm in was started by an awesome immigration rights activist who I'm with. What he did was he named the group something broad, and he invited people who weren't not just immigrant rights activists on Twitter, but people who were generally progressive activists who cared about his issue, but maybe it wasn't their number one issue, and basically used it as a space to cultivate community between immigrant rights nerds and just people who, you know, are broadly progressive but not particularly tied to the issue. And, you know, sort of like built us into like a little force that'll hit retweet on all of the DACA stuff that he shares with me. So that's really cool. And, you know, Erin, like when you began No Cop Money, how many people were following you on Twitter approximately?
I think it was around 2,000 or 3,000, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
ballooned. Well, now it's like 9,000, but I think after
Yeah,
No Cut
exactly.
Money, in a few weeks it was like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. As more people were
Mm-hmm.
retweeting it and more people were seeing it. Like one of the Pod Save America bros saw it and now follows me on Twitter, which is really crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think I suspect is the case is if you had only had like a handful of Twitter followers, I don't think this would have worked. But you didn't have like a bajillion Twitter followers. I think that you need to have at least some community on Twitter to be able to build community around like lifting something of this on your own, but you didn't need to be a huge Twitter account to do that. I'm sure that somebody could get stuff started with a couple hundred folks, for example. If you got like 5 people, then no, you need to work on building your community and begin tweeting and joining other people. But you don't need a huge Twitter following to do this. And growing these online actions builds your Twitter capacity to have a bigger Twitter community in general, period, moving forward, which will be important for all different kinds of online actions that you might take. So I'm really into, as you may have noticed, tagging companies to tell them to stop being evil. And Sleeping Giants has done really great work. All of their corporate pressure tactics that they've been doing, and tagging companies on Twitter has been a big piece of it. And one of the ways we can help organize our Twitter impact is through tweet storms. So New Mode has a tool, and there's other tools, but New Mode is what I'm familiar with, that lets you host a tweet storm where rather than clicking to sign a petition, you would be clicking and it would like help you, like you would fill in a form and you would give it your zip code and whatever, and it would give you a draft tweet that you would send to your elected officials or to business targets. You can do these also with email blasts that would go out to folks, the targeted email blasts, the targeted email addresses as well. And with the tweet storm makes it easier for you to get your members to just send a pre-generated, pre-written tweet. It's even better when you can get people to write their own though. And there's tools like Speechify, which I haven't tried out yet. And there's a new one called Organizer with an R that is like brand new, hot off the shelf, that sort of make you go through a list of prompts to KDAR. Yes, KDAR's tool is called organiz.org, and it's free new tweet storm tool. And it prompts you through a series of questions to write your own tweet to the target. And so it'll make sure that the person's tweet has the right hashtag, because remember, when people are left to their own devices, they'll probably use the wrong hashtag. It's just the way life is. These tweet storm tools will make sure that people use the right hashtag, and will help them find the specific corporate target or hashtag that they should be using on it. For example, if you have an action where you want people to tweet at their state assembly members, most people won't know who that is. So having a tweet storm tool where you type in your zip code and it automatically pulls up the Twitter handles of your assembly member is going to make it a lot easier for your supporters to be able to tweet at their assembly member, for example, right? So these tools can be really helpful if you're doing a lot of Twitter asks for folks. Yes. Another thing I like to ask folks to do on Twitter is to go where the people already are on Twitter, and where that is having conversations about television shows. So this example is a little bit old, but there's a new one every freaking day. Orange is the New Black. The woman whose book it was based on actually was using her platform to talk about prison reform and prison privatization and how it's freaking terrible. And so she was like literally doing on the hashtag for ONOITNB, promoting petitions around prison privatization, you know, targeted at the state level, i.e. the level at which people are more likely to respond to what you've asked, because Lord knows if I'm sending don't ask your people to do petitions that are ridiculous and don't make any sense. Like, don't ask me as a New Yorker to sign a petition to send a message to Mitch McConnell. He does not care what I think. I promise you that. That is insulting, and it makes people less likely to take online actions when you give them online actions to do that are clearly bullshit. So anyway, that often means that asking people to do things on the state level because their state reps are more likely to be responsive to them is a good thing. Anyway, so she was having folks sign this petition online, and she was bringing this conversation about the issue to people's live tweets about the television show. And look, TV shows are really freaking political, and fans on Twitter are having very political conversations about them right now. You know, Labor Day is coming up really soon. I would really like to see somebody do a live tweet for Sorry to Bother You, like go and host it. You can also host it as like a live screen together on your Facebook page, but like use some of these pop culture moments as things to bring your community together, whether it's live tweeting a TV show or hosting a tweet chat around a movie that has political or social content. That is a powerful activity to give your folks, but also will bring you into spaces where folks who don't know you are. So if you are planning on hosting any live tweets soon for any TV shows, or if there are pop culture moments coming up, I guess there won't be Super Bowl ads necessarily, but like what are some moments in television that you as an organization might want to live tweet with your political perspective? Throw that in the chat. I want to hear what you're thinking about. Speaking of being where people are and doing fun events, my friend Wynn is the innovator of doing awesome online doing awesome online fundraisers, really. Back when COVID first hit, they were putting together, they've been putting together some dumpling crawls to save Chinatown, because xenophobia was hurting business in Chinatowns in New York, even prior to COVID like being a thing in America. And when COVID hit, they're like, okay, we can't do these as in-person events anymore. So they decided to pivot their actions to being online dumpling crawls. And these were like actual fun online fundraisers. Online fundraisers that combined education with cultural conversation about food. And these became really successful fundraisers. These were stuff that just individual activists like Whitney Hugh, who is now running for city council, began on their own. And they invited folks to make a donation, small donation, and order takeout of Chinese food to be delivered to their home. And for their donation, you would join a Zoom chat. And the first one, we just had a conversation with each other about Chinese food and about supporting Chinese American businesses, as COVID was like really hurting them. And the fundraiser was for Chinese American businesses. It was really successful. And they ended up connecting with Patriot Act later, which is like a big deal television show you may have heard of. So of course that made the action be even more popular and brought it to even more folks. But I think the big things about having this be a good, Win Credible is indeed Win Credible, of having this be a good online fundraiser is it gave somebody something enjoyable and fun to do. And it had actual live conversation. It had cultural sensitivity around an issue. And Win is going to be hosting another dim sum fundraiser, this time for Whitney Hugh, like this upcoming week. And you can get in and join it for like $5. So if you want to see what that's all about, learn how to do a cool online chat fundraiser, I will be retweeting Wynn's fundraiser after this training so that you'll be able to join it. But yeah, so you'll see here, the graphics that they made for #SaveChinatown are attractive graphics, pay graphic designers, they need money, and they were using dumplings against hate hashtag, which is a good hashtag because it is compelling. They're doing visually stimulating graphics, etc. So somebody said a suggestion of, I just saw somebody giving me some pop culture ideas, NBA finals, that's what it was. Praising the labor and good decision-making around NBA finals, yeah. So we're coming close to a time, and I wanted to talk about doing some powerful days of action. And these days of action are combining online and offline actions in ways that are safe. So when you're organizing a day of action right now, you need to think about how are people going to be able to participate in them at different levels. Most New Yorkers don't have cars, right? Most Americans in general do. And that means that now is the era of the automobile the automobile protests, the car blockade, the car protests, the caravan protests. People have been calling them all different kinds of things. The first one that I saw was hosted by Never Again Action, which is a Jewish organization standing up against Trump's concentration camps. And they organized people to get in their cars and drive their cars around ICE detention centers. Now, I want to point something out. Driving your car around an ICE detention center means that traffic can't get in and out of that ICE detention center, which means they are literally getting in the way of ICE doing its job of genocide. And like they didn't keep this up for like 78 hours, right? But this is an actual direct action, because a direct action means you are taking action in a way that prevents the opposition from going about their business like business as usual. And direct action is not the same as any old kind of protest. I think it's important to keep these distinctions in mind when you talk about them. But this is a car-based direct action. And for those of us who were not in the state of North Carolina, or perhaps not car owners, they made sure that we were able to stay involved because they had a really excellent live stream of the car-based action that we were able to share and promote it, and making sure that you are well staffed to have somebody be doing a good quality live stream of those actions is more important than ever. Getting a good view from inside a car can be challenging. Think about how you're going to place the camera and place the folks. And combine your Twitter supporters, your little Twitter army, with your in-person car folks. Amanda suggests if you can find a radio station to do a live radio show during the caravan, it's a great idea too. We'd used that for our last car caravan. Tell me who we is. Oh, sorry, Ananda. I'd love to know which group you were. And yeah, radio stations, especially community radio and like radio stations that broadcast in languages other than English. They can be very community minded and like eager to help and support. Ember asks, I follow a lot of organizations, and it's interesting for me to see the different voices around the same issues. Being funny is so easily gets a lot of retweets, but not all orgs want to have a sassy voice. What are your thoughts on this? Do we all need to master the clapback to be relevant? This is a great question. So you need to sound like a human being, but you don't have to be sassy. That doesn't have to be your tone. It isn't appropriate for all things in all ways. When I was working with Make the Road New York, like we were generally like, I think our tone is like nurturing and warm and friendly, and we want to make sure that you've had a good meal. And like, we were not necessarily, the sarcasm, snazzy way, but like, if you're going to go that other direction, like be really genuine, like have a voice that sounds like a real human, and make sure that you are not talking in nonprofitese. There actually was a training yesterday about how to de-nonprofitize your social media presence. I would go and watch that webinar, and they have really good information on that. Oh, speaking of direct action, I also want to shout out, there was an amazing training yesterday on digital direct actions by Rose Espinola and Evan Sutton that I feel like was like part one of my training, basically. Like, go back and watch that video on digital direct actions. I've been spending most of my time here talking about tactics and not really talking about strategy. They talk about strategy. So go back and watch that later for sure. Also, hey everybody, I've been sharing tactics rather than strategy, so do keep that in mind. So we had a question for Erin. Someone would love to find out how you created the spreadsheet in order to make one about managed care organizations. So maybe you guys can follow up offline with this, because I feel like that's a probably pretty in-depth conversation. But yes, I think that would be great, and managed care organizations need us to yell at them. And I think a lot of them have brands on Twitter. Like, a lot of healthcare things have brands on Twitter. Campaigning against brands that aren't on Twitter is a little bit more challenging for me, but you can find them in other places. Try Facebook pages. A lot of them will block your comments before others can see them. Try messaging them. I recently did an experiment messaging Enterprise Rent-A-Car over the fact that they were renting their cars to the Gestapo over in Portland. I did not get responses from them, but it was just me. Possibly, if you got a lot of people to message the Facebook page, it would go past their messenger bot, and they might end up responding to it. Thinking about other places that you can reach a company and speak to them, reaching them on LinkedIn, directing emails to staff people, etc. Oh, right, so days of action. My slide is about days of action. It has pictures of the car caravan. So yeah, hit up your list so that you're asking the in-person people to get in their cars and drive, but giving people who can't options to make phone calls to ICE, phone calls to the corporate profiteers making money off of ICE, etc. Additionally, making sure that your digital rallies aren't BS is important. I'd like to share an example of a good digital rally. Lead Now Canada did a online rally. And what I think made it a useful online rally is it was used to pressure better and firmer commitments to anti-pipeline policies from elected officials who, like, they needed to have their support shored up. So these were electeds who were like, yeah, I'm against the pipeline. And Lead Now was like, I don't know that I 100% trust your commitment. So they didn't say this out loud, but they're like, I'm inviting you to come to our rally. And basically they had members ask these electeds questions. And like, look, you're not gonna get an elected that's hostile to you to come to this, but an elected who's like, knows that they need your support and is maybe wavering. This was an online rally that was basically the same thing as what we would call a congressional office visit, but online, right? And it was an opportunity to basically put a microphone on these elected officials, ask them the questions that they wanted to have asked, give them on record. And the electeds are like, this is great. I got to have a captive audience of 1,000 people in my province. And the organization is like, this is great because you just said on paper that you were going to support the thing that we want you to. That's a good kind of digital rally. I think that you have to be able to connect a digital rally with actual demands and actual commitments for it to have impact. And that it, this worked because they were hitting up lawmakers who they knew were trying to court them. I don't know that it would have worked if they were going after conservative members of parliament or whatever. So we're coming up on time again. Here's something else. Ask your list to send you social media content for you to share in your own social media. Housing Justice for All actually made a music video of user submitted videos of people singing about how they shouldn't have to pay rent. It was awesome. Action Sprout has a new Voices app that you can sign up for that's free for C3 nonprofits. It is not free for C4s, but it's pretty cheap. It does a good job of collecting user submitted videos that you can then use for your submission for your own social media content. And right now, like with fewer protests going on, we need all the user generated social media content we can get to keep our Instagrams fed and watered, so to speak, as well as our Facebook pages and Twitter pages. So asking your list to give you stuff to share is a meaningful ask for them. I think it's important when you're asking people to share things for them to explain to them why it matters. I explain to them why I want them to share something on social media. I explain to them why I want them to give me their photos to use. I explain to them what I'll be using them for. You need that transparency, and you need to have that theory of change explained about why you're asking for these things, or else people don't really understand it. Yes, the tool I mentioned was Action Sprout Voices. That's the tool I mentioned. I have a little screenshot of it. But yeah, if any social media ask, like when I ask my list to share something on Facebook, I tell them why. I say something like, we want you to share this on Facebook because you are the most powerful messenger to reach people in your community. A lot of people don't realize that sharing stuff on social media is powerful and that their friends are relying on them for information and relying on them for, propaganda for the good guys, right? So just filling in that little gap and explaining to them why you're asking for their social media share can increase the amount of people who actually do the thing. I am at time and I want to keep talking with you guys. One way to keep talking with me is to tweet at me, ELANA_Brooklyn, as you may have seen from the slides. My email, ilana@netrootsnation.org. I will get back to you. I do these trainings, like this is my job. So reach out to me. I will be holding additional trainings soon, including some introductory ones, some more advanced ones. Aaron, everybody should be following you on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle again?
At Aaron Naraf.
Awesome. And Ananda, you wanted to talk about the actual effectiveness of online petitions. So much depends on how you do the petition delivery. I think there's going to be some sessions about doing powerful online petitions. And if there isn't, I will be doing more about this in my upcoming webinar about the topic. You guys have been amazing, engaged, and inspiring. And I want to thank you for your support and for supporting for supporting Netroots Nation. It's too many online conferences in my mouth right now. Tim Ellis says, petitions are a core of Lead Now's model, great for launching campaign arcs, but on their own, they have limitations. Yeah, exactly. I think that that's true. Oh, somebody asked, does praise work as a motivator for elected officials as much as shame does? I absolutely think so. Everybody wants to look good. And there's the old book, Negotiate to Win, says you want to give people the opportunity to come out looking good before you tell them that there's like evil, basically. And so, some of my biggest successes in social media has been giving people the opportunity to do right before I then go after them with a digital sledgehammer. So be like, hey, Bob, I don't know if you know this, but XYZ is actually a really bad policy. Will you stand with us on da-da-da-da? And like give them that opportunity to like get in the right before you're like, because people do want to be loved. They want approval. This doesn't work as much, like as in Mitch McConnell doesn't care, right? That's not a theory of change. But like I'll start my contacts, with most Democratic elected officials from the standpoint of thinking that they probably want to do right before I come at them with a sledgehammer, frankly. Thank or spank, that's right. And positive counter pressure from the people is so valuable.
I will say briefly what you said about some people you want to reach out privately to. I will say that it honestly depends on the person. So if the person is like somewhat of a progressive ally and you like go full force after them on Twitter, I found that oftentimes, rightfully or not, they get like very offended, very defensive. If you reach out privately, I think it's a very different conversation. Most of the time, not all the time, most of the time. So if the person's an ally, I say reach out privately first and see what they say. I think it's always better to give them the benefit of the doubt. But if they're not an ally and they're already just a terrible person, like just go off. Like that's my philosophy anyway. I found that so the whole praise shame dynamic, I think it really depends on the person.
That's cosign, Aaron, absolutely. Somebody says that they're always worried about putting out video calls, that no one will do it. I'm finding that more people are doing them now than they used to. So if you have had no luck with video requests for user-generated videos before, now try it again. I also think you need to do more education with your list generally about why you want them and how you'll be using them. But a lot of people who were resistant to doing them before are more willing to do them now because everybody's on camera more. And like, hell, people probably want an excuse to like show that shirt that they got for Zoom meetings at this point, frankly. So I have also had a hard time with with video recruitment, like back in the past, and now I think it's gotten a lot better. And yes, thank you again, Ilana at netrootsnation.org, ELANA at netrootsnation.org, and I'm at newmediamentors.org. I love you guys. It's just been fabulous. And thank you, Aaron. I will return to see you in the wages and trenches of Twitter. And thank you, Tim, for hooking me up with the Lead Now Canada folks. Those were great folks. Bye.
Okay, there was a raised hand, but I think it went away.
Yeah, sometimes people hit that by accident.
I try to tag them in chat if I can, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, thank you. You were super helpful, and this went really well. And thank you.
Get a snack, get a drink of water.
I was gonna say, if I don't eat right now, I'm gonna die. Okay. Yeah, have a good afternoon, my dear. Take care.
See you around.
See you around.
Bye.